Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into your brain's command center. Those mental processes that help you focus, manage your goals, and somehow cut through all the noise of our super distracting world.
You know that feeling, right? It's almost universal. You're trying to get some work done, but then your phone buzzes. You suddenly remember an email you totally forgot to send. The dog starts barking out of nowhere. It's this daily struggle, this fight to focus on what actually matters. That's at the very heart of what we're talking about today.
Well, scientists actually have a name for the system that helps you manage all that internal chaos. It's called cognitive control. Think of it as the core function that helps you optimize your behavior to get things done, especially when you have to fight against those automatic, knee-jerk reactions.
Probably the best way to get your head around this whole concept is to imagine cognitive control as the CEO of your brain. Its main job is to provide that top-down direction, making sure all the different departments, your thoughts, your memories, your actions, are all working together toward the same goal.
Okay, so how does this brain CEO actually run the whole company? Well, researchers have this great way of talking about it. They call it unity and diversity. There's this one single unified goal, which is just keeping you on track, but it gets that done through three pretty distinct but interconnected core jobs. And those three core departments are inhibiting, updating, and shifting. Now, while they all work together under the CEO's direction, what's really fascinating is that studies show they're also separable processes. Each one has its own very specific role to play. First up, we've got inhibition. This is basically your brain's brake pedal. It's what stops you from acting on impulse. A perfect example is the famous Stroop test, where you see the word red, but it's printed in blue ink. Your automatic, or as scientists say, prepotent response is to just read the word. Inhibition is that control process that slams on the brakes so you can stop that impulse and correctly name the color of the ink instead.
All right, next is the updating department. This is all about managing your working memory, that mental scratch pad you're using for whatever you're doing right now. Updating is constantly refreshing this workspace with new, relevant information while, and this is key, actively throwing out the old data that you don't need anymore. It's got to do that to prevent interference.
And finally, we have shifting. This is your brain's ability to be mentally flexible, to just move between different tasks or rules or ways of thinking. It's the absolutely crucial function that lets you stop working on a big presentation and seamlessly switch gears to help your kid with their math homework without getting stuck on that old task.
So, where in the brain does the CEO actually hold all its meetings? Well, the headquarters for cognitive control is a region right at the very front of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, or PFC. Let's take a quick tour of the C-suite.
And this is where we really get to see the diversity of our brain's leadership team. It's just like a real company. Different executives have totally different jobs. So for example, one area, the right inferior frontal gyrus, acts as the company's brake, handling that inhibition we were just talking about. Then you've got other specialized regions in charge of, say, monitoring your working memory or acting as a switchboard to help us shift between tasks. The big idea here is that control isn't just one single thing. It's a whole team of specialists working together. Now, this system is remarkably effective when it's working well. But what happens when the CEO gets totally overwhelmed, or when the communication between all these departments just breaks down? This is where we start to see a really powerful link to mental health. It turns out that having impaired cognitive control isn't a feature of just one single disorder. In fact, scientists call it a transdiagnostic issue. Problems with these core functions are a common thread that runs through so many different conditions, from the impulsivity you see in ADHD to the difficulty with goal-directed behavior that's common in depression and addiction. In fact, this is so common that researchers have identified something they call the P factor, which stands for a general psychopathology factor. It basically describes a statistical fact that different mental health disorders often occur together or are highly comorbid. And what's really interesting is that this P factor is strongly correlated with a breakdown in this common underlying cognitive control system.
But wait, there's another layer to this. It turns out that not all control is created equal. The brain's CEO actually operates differently depending on the emotional stakes of a situation. And that leads us to a really key distinction between what researchers call hot and cool control.
The difference is pretty clear. Cool control is for all those logical, non-emotional tasks, like solving a puzzle. This relies on those lateral PFC networks we saw earlier. Hot control, though, that kicks in for emotionally charged situations, like trying to resist a really tempting dessert. This recruits totally different brain circuitry, linking parts of the PFC with deep emotional centers like the amygdala.
Okay, so we've seen what cognitive control is, how it's organized in the brain, and what happens when it starts to falter. Let's try to tie this all together now and really find the core principle that makes this whole system work. I mean, what is the ultimate key to your brain CEO's power?
So you might be wondering, wait, is cognitive control just a fancy term for intelligence? And that's a great question. They're definitely related, for sure, but they are not the same thing. Think of it this way. Intelligence is like your brain's raw problem-solving horsepower, while cognitive control is the specific skill of using your goals to direct that horsepower. One is the engine's power, the other is the steering wheel.
So what's the unity we talked about? What's the one thing that ties inhibiting, updating, and shifting all together? This quote right here gets to the absolute heart of it. The single most important job of your brain's CEO, the common thread running through every single control function, is the ability to actively hold a goal in your mind and then use that goal to shape and bias everything you do, think, and perceive.
And that, right there, brings us to our final and I think pretty provocative thought. We've established that cognitive control is a set of distinct yet unified brain functions. We've seen that these functions can be impaired. So, the big question is, if it's a skill, can it also be strengthened? Can we actually train our brain CEO to be more effective? That's a topic for future explainers. Thanks for watching.